You ever hear a sound so satisfying it makes you forget every miserable morning that came before it? Because at exactly 6:15 a.m. last Tuesday, Brenda Whitmore finally met 600 pounds of consequences. Thunk! The sound rolled across Pinewood Gardens like a cannon shot wrapped in steel and concrete. My coffee mug rattled against the kitchen counter hard enough to spill dark roast across my hand, but I barely felt it. Outside my front window, steam curled from the crushed front bumper of a pearl white Escalade while Brenda Whitmore stood frozen in the middle of my driveway, both hands gripping her steering wheel like she could somehow rewind the last 3 seconds of her life. The early November air smelled like cold asphalt, burnt rubber, and fresh concrete dust. I remember every detail because I'd spent 6 straight weeks imagining that exact moment. Brenda's SUV sat crooked against the curb, front passenger tire tilted inward at an angle tires aren't supposed to bend. One headlight blinked weakly against the dawn haze like it was struggling to stay conscious. And right in front of that $80,000 Suburban war machine sat my trash can, perfectly upright, not a crack on it, just a few white paint streaks from her bumper running across the side like victory stripes. Brenda shoved her door open so hard it bounced off the hinges. "What did you do?" she screamed before her high heels even hit the driveway. Her voice sliced through the quiet neighborhood harder than the collision itself. Porch lights flickered on up and down the street. Curtains moved. Pinewood Gardens loved drama almost as much as it loved pretending it didn't exist. I just stood there holding my coffee, calm as Sunday morning. "Morning, Brenda." Her face turned the color of raw salmon. "You psychopath. You rigged this. You damaged my vehicle." The funny thing about people like Brenda Whitmore is they spend so much time bullying others they genuinely believe consequences are illegal. I looked past her at the trash can sitting near the curb, exactly where city ordinance required it every Tuesday morning. 3 feet from the street. Same position it had occupied for nearly 2 years. The same spot Brenda had slammed into 56 times before today, usually around 15 miles per hour, usually with that same smug little smile on her face afterward. Plastic shattered, garbage everywhere, coffee grounds soaking into my driveway while she drove away pretending it was another accident. Every single week. The cold morning wind carried the sharp metallic smell of her leaking radiator fluid across my lawn as she stomped toward me. You can't put dangerous objects in the road. Dangerous objects. That almost made me laugh. See, 6 months ago, I moved into Pinewood Gardens after my divorce finalized. 45 years old. 22 years as an electrician. 2 kids. 1 used Ford work van. 1 mortgage barely hanging on by overtime pay and black coffee. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was looking for somewhere my daughter Emma could do homework in peace and my son Tyler could stop hearing his parents scream through apartment walls. But Pinewood Gardens had Brenda Whitmore. Huawei Ali, self-appointed guardian of neighborhood perfection. Pearl white Escalade. Matching tennis outfits. Smile sharp enough to cut drywall. She treated this subdivision like her personal kingdom and everyone else like unpaid extras in her private little fantasy about property values. The first time she crushed my trash can, she claimed the streets were narrow. By the 3rd time, she blamed poor visibility. By the 10th, she stopped pretending altogether. She'd roll down her window afterward, sunglasses hiding those little predator eyes, and say things like, "Maybe if you people learned proper placement, you people." Funny phrase coming from a woman standing in front of a man who paid his taxes, coached Little League, and spent most of his life fixing other people's wiring while they slept safely under air conditioning and porch lights. But Brenda saw grease under fingernails and decided I was the kind of neighbor property values needed protection from. What she didn't realize was electricians understand systems better than most people. Pressure, resistance, weak points. And after 56 smashed trash cans, I stopped thinking like a victim. I started thinking like a builder. Brenda pointed a trembling finger at the trash, like it had personally betrayed her. "I'm calling the police." I nodded slowly. Good idea. Because sitting quietly under the gutter above my garage was a brand new security camera with crystal clear night vision and a perfect view of my driveway. And inside that harmless looking trash can steel rebar, reinforced concrete, 600 pounds of patience. Brenda just didn't know it yet. The police showed up 7 minutes later. I remember because the microwave clock above my stove still blinked 6:22 when the first patrol cruiser rolled into Pinewood Gardens with headlights cutting through the pale morning fog. Brenda immediately switched gears the second Officer Daniel Ruiz stepped out of the vehicle. One moment, she was screaming in my driveway like a woman who had just lost a war. The next, her voice softened into that fake suburban sweetness she used whenever authority figures appeared. "Officer, thank goodness you are here," she said, clutching her cardigan dramatically against her chest. He intentionally sabotaged my vehicle. Officer Ruiz looked from the bent front axle of the Escalade to my untouched trash, sitting peacefully by the curb. Even half asleep, the man looked confused. "Sir," he asked me carefully, "is this your trash can?" "Yes, sir. And it was placed here for collection, exactly 3 feet from the curb. Same spot every Tuesday for almost 2 years." Brenda cut in immediately. "He reinforced it. Nobody builds a trash can out of concrete." The cold wind rattled dead leaves across the street while Officer Ruiz crouched beside the bin, tapping the side with his flashlight. Thunk! Even that tiny sound carried weight. Literal weight. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "why exactly did your vehicle hit the trash can?" Silence. Beautiful silence. Brenda opened her mouth, then closed it again. Across the street, Mrs. Olivia Bennett peeked through her curtains with the kind of excitement only retired neighbors truly understand. By then, half the subdivision was awake. Pinewood Gardens ran on gossip the same way my work van ran on bad gas station coffee. Brenda folded her arms tightly. "These containers create hazards. The city sanitation department disagrees," I replied calmly. I could feel her glare burning through me harder than the steam still rising from a radiator. The truth was Brenda had hated me before she ever learned my name. I figured that out the first month I moved in. Divorced guy, blue-collar electrician, work van parked outside, calloused hands. HOA neighborhoods like Pinewood Gardens love contractors when something breaks, but they do not exactly love living next to them. Brenda especially. She once described my garage as industrial energy during an HOA meeting. Industrial energy. Like I was running a steel mill instead of storing ladders and toolboxes. The smell of motor oil and sawdust apparently offended her delicate suburban ecosystem. Officer Ruiz stood up and handed me back my license after checking my address. "Honestly, sir, I do not see a violation here." Brenda looked like someone had unplugged her life support. "Are you serious?" she snapped. "He damaged my car." Ruiz glanced again at the perfectly upright trash can. "Ma'am, from what I can tell, your vehicle damaged itself." That almost broke me. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop from smiling. Because 6 weeks earlier, standing in my garage, surrounded by broken plastic lids and scattered garbage bags, I made myself a promise. If Brenda Whitmore wanted to keep treating my property like a speed bump, eventually physics was going to join the conversation. By 8 o'clock, Brenda's Escalade was sitting on the back of a tow truck while she argued with her insurance company loud enough for 3 streets to hear. The metallic clank of chains tightening around her axle echoed through the neighborhood, like church bells announcing karma had finally arrived on schedule. I stood in my garage pretending to organize extension cords while secretly enjoying every second of it. The smell of cold concrete and motor oil wrapped around me like comfort food. "This is not over, Marcus!" Brenda shouted across my lawn while the tow operator shook his head at the damage. "You deliberately created a trap." I leaned against my workbench calmly. "It is a trash can, Brenda, not a land. Mean it." The tow truck driver actually snorted, trying not to laugh. That made her even angrier. But the real problem for Brenda was not the damaged SUV. It was the audience. Pinewood Gardens had witnessed the entire thing. Mrs. Olivia Bennett was already halfway through her morning phone calls before the tow truck even left the subdivision. By lunchtime, every mailbox and cul-de-sac in the neighborhood knew Brenda Whitmore had spent weeks smashing a neighbor's trash cans with her Escalade and finally lost a fight against reinforced concrete. The image was too perfect not to spread. especially in an HOA community built entirely on appearances. Around noon, I opened my front door and found a bright yellow violation notice taped to the glass. Improper modification of waste receptacle. Community safety hazard. $500 fine, pending board review. I just stared at it for a second while cold wind pushed dry leaves across my porch. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was desperate. Brenda had switched from predator to panic mode overnight. That was new. Emma walked into the kitchen after school and held up the violation notice between two fingers like it smelled bad. Dad, did she seriously fine you because her car lost? Pretty much. Tyler nearly choked on his chocolate milk laughing. That trash, Ken is undefeated. I tried to stay serious, but hearing my kids laugh for the first time in weeks hit harder than I expected. Divorce changes the atmosphere inside a house. Even when nobody is yelling anymore, tension lingers like smoke in drywall. But that afternoon felt lighter somehow. Outside, though, Brenda was spiraling. Her white Escalade disappeared for 3 days while rumors spread faster than sprinkler water on hot pavement. Some neighbors claimed the repairs would cost $12,000. Others said insurance investigators were asking questions about repeated collisions in the same location. Repeated collisions. That phrase mattered, because every smashed trash came before this one had been documented. Photos, dates, security footage. 56 separate incidents saved neatly inside a folder on my laptop labeled Brenda. Electrician survived by documenting everything. Wiring paths, voltage loads, permits, mistakes, patterns. And Brenda Whitmore had become a pattern. That Friday evening, as orange sunset reflected off quiet suburban windows, I noticed something strange. Brenda was standing at the edge of my driveway again. Silent this time, arms crossed, studying the trash, like it had personally humiliated her. The cold breeze carried the faint smell of her expensive perfume mixed with fresh car wax from somebody washing an SUV down the block. She looked up slowly and locked eyes with me through the garage window. That smile was gone now, replaced with something colder. That was when I realized the collision had not ended the war. It had only embarrassed her publicly. And people like Brenda Whitmore never forgive embarrassment. Monday night smelled like burnt coffee, wet leaves, and bad decisions. The Pinewood Gardens Community Center sat glowing under fluorescent lights that made everybody look slightly guilty, especially Brenda Whitmore. I could hear her voice through the clubhouse doors before I even walked inside. Sharp, controlled, artificially calm in the same way people sound right before they lose control completely. The folding chairs were packed tighter than I had ever seen them. Usually HOA meetings attracted maybe 6 retirees and one guy angry about mailbox paint. Tonight, nearly 30 homeowners filled the room. Word about the Escalade collision had spread far beyond our subdivision. People came for entertainment the same way folks slowed down for car wrecks on the interstate. Only this wreck had happened to the HOA queen herself. Brenda stood near the front table wearing a navy blazer and pearls like she was preparing for court instead of a neighborhood meeting. Her SUV was still missing, which somehow made her look smaller without it parked outside like a suburban throne. Gerald Thornfield sat beside her flipping nervously through paperwork with the energy of a man who realized too late he had backed the wrong bully. The room smelled like cheap carpet cleaner and tension. "Mr. Holloway," Brenda announced the second I entered. "Please take a seat. We have several urgent violations to address." Of course we did. I sat quietly near the back while whispers floated around the room. Mrs. Olivia Bennett gave me a tiny nod from the second row. Across the aisle, a younger couple I barely knew suddenly found the ceiling fascinating when Brenda glanced their direction. Fear does that to neighborhoods. Makes decent people act invisible. Brenda slid a stack of papers across the table dramatically. Due to unauthorized structural modifications to a residential waste container, the board is proposing immediate fines totaling $2,000 pending further investigation. Somebody in the back actually muttered, "You have got to be kidding." Brenda ignored it. Additionally, she continued, "We are reviewing concerns regarding unsafe mechanical activity occurring in Mr. Holloway's garage." There it was. The real issue. Not the trash can. Not community safety. Me. The electrician with grease stains on his driveway and a work van Brenda hated looking at every morning. I leaned back slowly in my chair while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. Unsafe mechanical activity? I asked calmly. You mean replacing outlets and fixing lawn equipment? Brenda's smile tightened. Commercial-style operations negatively impact property values. Property values. Those two words carried more religion in Pinewood Gardens than anything preached in church on Sundays. Gerald cleared his throat weakly. There have also been complaints regarding excessive noise. From power tools? I asked. Used before 7 p.m.? Silence again. I could practically hear people recalculating whose side they wanted to be on. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Olivia Bennett slowly raised her hand. The room turned toward her. 80 years old. Tiny silver glasses. Always polite. The kind of woman HOA tyrants assume will stay quiet forever. I would like the meeting notes to reflect, she said carefully, that I personally witnessed Brenda Whitmore strike Mr. Holloway's trash cans repeatedly over several months. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Brenda's face froze completely. Mrs. Olivia kept going, including intentional collisions on at least 4 occasions. Gerald started sweating through his collar immediately. Brenda snapped toward her so fast her chair legs screeched across the floor. That is absolutely false. No, ma'am, Mrs. Olivia replied softly. False is pretending 56 accidents happen in the exact same spot. A few people laughed before catching themselves. Brenda's knuckles turned white around her paperwork. That was when I realized something important. The collision had cracked more than her front axle. It cracked the illusion that she controlled the entire neighborhood. Once people smell weakness in a bully, fear starts evaporating fast. Brenda recovered quickly, though. People like her always do. Fine, she said coldly. Then perhaps we should review Mr. Holloway's own compliance history. She opened another folder. Thick, organized. My name printed neatly across the tab. That folder told me everything. While I was busy building one reinforced trash can, Brenda had been building a case against me. Violation notices, noise complaints, anonymous reports. Every tiny detail of my life documented like I was under federal investigation instead of raising 2 kids in suburbia. And suddenly I understood why she looked so calm again. Because Brenda Whitmore was not planning revenge anymore. She was planning removal. The first certified letter arrived 3 days after the HOA meeting. Thick envelope. Bright red, final notice stamped across the front like I owed money to organized crime instead of the Suburban Homeowners Association. The paper smelled fresh off the printer when I opened it at my kitchen counter while bacon grease crackled softly behind me on Saturday morning. Emma sat doing algebra homework nearby. Tyler was half asleep on the couch wrapped in a blanket watching cartoons. Normal life, at least until Brenda Whitmore got involved. Failure to comply with community safety standards may result in escalating financial penalties and possible legal action. Legal action. Over a trash can. I read the sentence twice while cold anger settled into my chest like wet concrete. Brenda had attached 6 separate violations all at once. Unauthorized structure modification. Commercial vehicle visibility. Excessive garage activity. Improper storage conditions. Non-compliant driveway appearance. Even my basketball hoop suddenly violated neighborhood aesthetics despite sitting there untouched since before I bought the house. The woman was carpet bombing my life with paperwork. Tyler looked up from the couch. Is that the crazy lady again? Yep. Can she actually do this? That question hung in the kitchen longer than it should have. Because honestly, most people never realize how much power cowardly organizations hand to petty people until they become the target themselves. Brenda understood something most bullies understand instinctively. Exhaustion wins wars. Not truth. Not fairness. Just pressure. Endless pressure. By Monday morning, somebody reported my work van for violating commercial parking guidelines. Tuesday brought a noise complaint while I replaced a bathroom outlet inside my own garage with the door closed. Wednesday, code enforcement showed up because an anonymous caller claimed I was operating an illegal repair business from my home. The city inspector looked around my spotless garage full of neatly organized tools and sighed so deeply I almost felt bad for him. "Mr. Holloway," he said quietly while checking boxes on his clipboard, "off the record, somebody really wants your life complicated." The smell of sawdust and electrical cleaner filled the garage while he glanced toward Brenda's house across the street. Her curtains shifted immediately. "Watching. Always watching. You know who filed it?" I asked. The inspector gave me a tired smile. "Officially? No." Then he drove away. That night, I sat alone in the garage after the kids went to sleep listening to classic rock hum quietly from my old shelf radio. The concrete floor still carried faint white dust from building the reinforced trash weeks earlier. I stared at the violation notices spread across my workbench under fluorescent light and started noticing patterns. Exact wording repeated across different complaints. Timestamps clustered together. Identical phrases buried inside anonymous reports. Brenda was not improvising anymore. She was systemizing. That was the moment my electrician brain kicked fully online. See, troubleshooting electrical systems teaches you something important. Random failures are rare. Patterns mean intent. I opened my laptop and started building folders. Every notice scanned. Every date logged. Security footage organized by timestamp. 56 trash collisions. 17 violation notices in 12 days. 4 anonymous complaints submitted within 1 hour of each other. The deeper I dug, the uglier things started looking. Brenda had targeted almost every person in Pinewood Gardens who did not fit her version of perfect suburbia. The retired mechanic on Birch Lane got fined over driveway stains. Single mom across the park cited for children's toys visible after sunset. Elderly Vietnamese couple warned about non-approved garden decorations that turned out to be family prayer lanterns. Different people. Same pattern. Pressure. Humiliation. Isolation. My stomach tightened while the glow from the laptop reflected across stacks of violation paperwork. Outside, sprinklers hissed softly across perfectly trimmed lawns while cold October wind rattled dry branches against my gutters. Pinewood Gardens suddenly felt less like a neighborhood and more like a machine Brenda Whitmore operated through fear. Then I found the real mistake she made. Buried inside public HOA meeting records uploaded online 6 months earlier was a reimbursement form signed by Brenda herself. Vehicle maintenance reimbursement. $387. Description: damage sustained during community enforcement activity. I stared at that line for a long time. Community enforcement activity. That woman had actually submitted reimbursement requests for hitting my trash cans. And Gerald Thornfield approved them. I leaned back slowly in my chair while the refrigerator hummed quietly inside the house, and realization settled over me like a power surge. Brenda Whitmore had not just been harassing me. She had been documenting her own abuse of authority with official HOA records the entire time. And suddenly the reinforced trash was no longer the trap. It was just a trigger. The next Saturday smelled like rain, fresh mulch, and expensive perfume. Pinewood Gardens was hosting its annual Fall Beautification Day, which basically meant homeowners pretending to enjoy planting flowers while silently judging each other's landscaping choices. White tents lined the entrance near the clubhouse. Somebody played soft country music through cheap outdoor speakers that crackled every few seconds. Kids chased each other across the grass while Brenda Whitmore floated through the event wearing cream-colored boots that had clearly never touched actual dirt in their lives. If you looked quickly, the whole neighborhood seemed perfect. That was the illusion Brenda protected harder than anything else. I stood near the coffee station holding a paper cup that tasted vaguely like burnt hazelnut while watching her work the crowd. Smile here. Touch somebody's shoulder there. Laugh at Gerald Thornfield's terrible jokes. The woman operated like a politician 2 weeks before an election. But once you saw the machinery underneath, you could never unsee it again. Every conversation was calculated. Every compliment transactional. "Mr. Holloway." I turned and found Mrs. Olivia Bennett beside me, holding a plate of cookies wrapped in napkins. You look like a man building something dangerous. I laugh quietly. Doi. I prosecuted fraud cases for 26 years, dear. I know that face. The wind carried the smell of wet grass through the parking lot while she lowered her voice slightly. You found something, didn't you? I glanced toward Brenda across the lawn. Maybe. Mrs. Olivia adjusted her glasses carefully. Then let me give you some advice. Petty people leave emotional evidence. Narcissists leave paper trails. That line stayed in my head all afternoon. Emotional evidence versus paper trails. Brenda had plenty of both. Around noon, Gerald climbed onto the little wooden stage near the clubhouse entrance and started thanking everyone for protecting neighborhood standards. Standard HOA speech. Half corporate seminar. Half cult meeting. But then he made a mistake. Special appreciation goes to Brenda Whitmore for her tireless enforcement efforts this year. Enforcement efforts. Not community support. Not volunteer work. Enforcement. Even the wording sounded ugly now that people had started paying attention. I noticed several neighbors exchange looks immediately. Once cracks appear in authority, people start hearing things differently. Brenda smiled proudly while applause scattered awkwardly across the crowd. Then Gerald added, her commitment has saved this community thousands of dollars in property preservation costs. That caught my attention instantly. Thousands of dollars. My electrician brain latched onto the phrase like a wire finding current. Later that evening, after the event ended and the neighborhood settled in a quiet suburban darkness, I sat in my garage again with my laptop open and the smell of motor oil hanging thick in the air. Rain tapped softly against the roof while classic rock hummed low through the radio. I started digging deeper into HOA financial reports. Most people never read HOA budgets. That is exactly why people like Brenda count on them staying hidden. The reimbursement form was not isolated, not even close. Over 2 years, Brenda Whitmore had billed the HOA nearly $11,000 under vague descriptions like community enforcement response, property intervention, and hazard mitigation activity. Hazard mitigation activity. I almost laughed out loud. The woman had turned harassment into an expense account. But the real jackpot sat buried inside maintenance invoices approved by Gerald Thornfield himself. Fuel reimbursements, vehicle repairs, exterior cleaning services. Every single one tied to Brenda's Escalade. And several lined up perfectly with dates my trash cans had been destroyed. I leaned closer toward the screen while cold rainwater streaked down the garage windows. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Pinewood Gardens homeowners had literally been paying Brenda back for smashing my property. Publicly funded neighborhood bullying disguised as maintenance enforcement. Then I found a signature that changed everything. Gerald had approved every reimbursement personally. Every single one. The same Gerald pretending to act neutral during HOA meetings. The same Gerald hiding behind Brenda while she terrorized half the subdivision. My stomach tightened while the fluorescent light buzzed softly overhead. Outside, thunder rolled low across the sky, because suddenly this was not about one angry HOA Karen anymore. This was conspiracy, financial misconduct, abuse of authority backed by official records and approved budgets. And the beautiful part? They documented all of it themselves. I sat back slowly in my chair and stared toward the reinforced trash visible at the edge of my driveway under the yellow glow of the streetlight. 600 pounds of concrete sitting perfectly still in the rain. Brenda thought that trash humiliated her. What she did not realize was that the collision forced me to start looking. And once electricians start tracing bad wiring through a system, eventually we find the main breaker. Tuesday night arrived cold enough to turn breath visible under the streetlights. The kind of dry November chill that makes suburban neighborhoods feel strangely empty after dark. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by folders, invoices, and printed HOA reports while Emma colored quietly beside me, and Tyler built something questionable out of old cereal boxes and duct tape. The smell of grilled cheese and tomato soup still lingered in the house, warm and familiar against the sharp cold pressing at the windows. "Dad," Emma asked softly without looking up from her markers, "are we in trouble?" That question hit harder than any violation notice Brenda ever taped to my door. I stared at the paperwork scattered across the table. $11,000 in fake reimbursements. Vehicle repair payments tied directly to community enforcement. Official records proving Pinewood Gardens homeowners had unknowingly funded Brenda Whitmore's harassment campaign for years. No, I said carefully, but some other people might be. Emma nodded slowly, like she understood more than a 12-year-old should. Divorce teaches kids how to read tension the way sailors read storms. After they went upstairs for bed, I carried everything into the garage and started organizing evidence properly. Electricians survive through systems. Labels, order, documentation. Chaos gets people electrocuted. Same principle applies to corruption. I sorted everything into separate binders while cold fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Security footage timestamps, reimbursement approvals, public HOA records, financial statements. By midnight, my workbench looked less like a garage and more like a fraud investigation office. The reinforced trash can sat outside beneath the streetlight, casting a long shadow across the driveway like a silent witness. Around 12:40 a.m., headlights rolled slowly past my house. White sedan, tinted windows. No surprise there. Brenda had graduated from violation notices to surveillance. The car circled once, then parked briefly across the street before driving away again. I watched through the garage window while the smell of solder and cold concrete filled the air around me. That was when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Mr. Holloway? The voice sounded nervous. Male. Young. Yes. My name is Daniel Pierce. I work for Ridgeway Accounting downtown. Papers rustled quietly in the background like he was calling from somewhere private. I think you need to know something about Brenda Whitmore. Every instinct in my body sharpened instantly. I am listening. Silence for a second. Then he exhaled hard. My firm handles Pinewood Gardens, HOA, bookkeeping. I leaned forward slowly in my chair. And those reimbursements you found? He whispered. That is not all she has been billing. Cold spread through my chest like somebody opened a freezer door inside me. Outside, wind rattled dead leaves along the curb while Daniel continued talking fast, nervous enough to trip over certain words. They're a landscaping contract connected to her cousin's company. Duplicate maintenance invoices. Security patrol expenses that never existed. Gerald signs everything she puts in front of him. My garage suddenly felt smaller. Tighter. Why are you telling me this? Another long silence. Then finally, because my grandmother lives in Pinewood Gardens. Brenda fined her $300 because her wheelchair ramp was not aesthetically compliant. That sentence sat heavy between us. I closed my eyes briefly. There was again. Not rules. Not standards. Control. Do you have proof? I asked quietly. I copied files. My heartbeat slowed immediately. Calm. Focused. The same feeling I get before working on live electrical panels. Dangerous work requires steady hands. Can you send them? Already did. My laptop chimed softly 2 seconds later. Incoming email. Attachments. A lot of attachments. Financial spreadsheets. Internal memos. Vendor invoices. The smell of ozone drifted from an old extension cord heater near my toolbox while I opened the first document. And suddenly the numbers exploded. $43,000 in questionable HOA spending over 18 months. Fake security contracts. Inflated maintenance bills. Reimbursements approved without board review. Brenda Whitmore was not just abusing authority anymore. She was running Pinewood Gardens like a private ATM machine. Then I opened the final attachment. Audio transcript. HOA executive meeting. Gerald Thornfield's voice shaky and nervous. Brenda's voice sharp as broken glass. If Holloway keeps pushing, she said, we will bury him in fines until he cannot afford the mortgage. Silence filled my garage after that recording ended. Deep silence. The kind that hums louder than noise. I looked out toward the reinforced trash, sitting perfectly still under the streetlight while cold wind swept across the empty street. Brenda thought she was fighting over neighborhood appearances. What she never realized was that every fake violation Every smashed trash can, every reimbursement form had slowly transformed a tired electrician into the worst possible enemy for corrupt people. A patient man with evidence. The emergency HOA meeting started at 7 o'clock sharp on Thursday night, but by 6:15, the Pinewood Gardens clubhouse parking lot was already overflowing. Pickup trucks lined the curb beside luxury SUVs like two different Americas accidentally trapped in the same zip code. Cold air carried the smell of damp leaves and coffee as homeowners crowded near the entrance, whispering harder than church ladies after a scandal. Everybody knew something was coming. They just did not know how bad it was going to get. I walked in carrying 2 black binders and 1 flash drive. That was it. No lawyer. No dramatic entrance. Just evidence. Brenda Whitmore stood near the front table wearing a cream blazer so stiff it looked armored. Gerald Thornfield sat beside her, sweating through another expensive dress shirt while pretending to shuffle paperwork calmly. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly against the low rumble of nervous conversations filling the room. Brenda spotted me immediately. Her smile appeared on instinct, but this time it did not fully form. Predators recognized danger eventually. "Mr. Holloway," she said carefully, "this meeting concerns your continued violations and hostile behavior toward the board." Hostile behavior. That almost impressed me. The woman could spin reality smoother than a politician on election night. I sat quietly near the center aisle while people packed every folding chair available. Mrs. Olivia Bennett sat beside me, holding her purse on her lap, like she was attending a trial instead of an HOA meeting. Maybe she was. Gerald cleared his throat loudly into the microphone. "We are here tonight to address escalating tensions within Pinewood Gardens and discuss possible legal remedies regarding certain residents who refuse to comply with community standards." Community standards again. Always those words. I opened the first binder slowly while paper slid softly against paper inside the silent room. "Before we discuss standards," I said calmly, "I think homeowners deserve to see where their HOA fees have actually been going." The entire room shifted instantly. Brenda's posture tightened. Gerald stopped blinking for a second. Beautiful. I connected the flash drive to the clubhouse projector while cold fluorescent light reflected across dozens of nervous faces. Spreadsheet after spreadsheet appeared on the wall behind Brenda. Fuel reimbursements, vehicle repair payments, fake maintenance contracts, duplicate landscaping invoices, $43,000 in questionable spending highlighted in bright yellow. Silence swallowed the room whole. You could hear the heating system clicking inside the ceiling vents. Brenda recovered first. Those records are being taken completely out of context. Really? I clicked the remote again. Up popped the reimbursement form tied directly to the morning her Escalade collided with a reinforced trash can. Community enforcement damage. Approved by Gerald Thornfield. A few people actually gasped. Somebody near the back muttered, "No way." Gerald looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him. Brenda stepped forward sharply. "This is harassment." "No. Irrobia avanli." "This is accounting." A nervous laugh rolled through part of the room before dying quickly. I kept going. Security footage timestamps appeared next. Photos of destroyed trash cans. Insurance repair records. Anonymous complaints filed within minutes of each other. Every pattern laid out clean and simple like wiring diagrams. Because corruption always looks complicated until somebody organizes it properly. Then it starts looking embarrassingly obvious. Brenda's voice sharpened instantly. "You illegally accessed private records." "Actually," Mrs. Olivia Bennett interrupted calmly beside me. "HOA financial reports are legally accessible to homeowners under state transparency laws." Brenda whipped toward her with visible panic flashing across her face for the first time. Real panic. Not anger. Not control. Fear. Then I played the audio recording. Brenda's own voice filled the clubhouse speakers crystal clear. "If Holloway keeps pushing, we will bury him in fines until he cannot afford the mortgage." Dead silence hit the room afterward, so hard it almost felt physical. "No va sin conversations anymore. No shifting chairs. Just shock." Gerald closed his eyes slowly like a man, realizing his career had just exploded publicly. Then came the final blow. I displayed the reimbursement totals tied directly to Brenda's vehicle over 18 months. Several match dates of destroyed personal property throughout the neighborhood. My property, other neighbors' property, HOA money funding harassment disguised as enforcement. Mrs. Olivia stood carefully beside me. As a retired federal prosecutor, she said calmly, I strongly recommend this board contact independent legal counsel immediately. The smell of stale coffee and panic filled the clubhouse while people started talking all at once. Loud, angry, confused. Questions flew across the room like sparks from damaged wiring. Brenda tried regaining control, but her voice kept getting drowned out. Somebody demanded resignations. Somebody else asked about missing reserve funds. A younger father stood up demanding to know why his family received violation notices over children's chalk drawings while Brenda billed the neighborhood for SUV repairs. Then Gerald Thornfield finally cracked. I only signed what Brenda told me to sign, he blurted into the microphone. Wrong thing to say. Absolutely catastrophic thing to say. The room erupted instantly. Brenda stared at him like she wanted to erase his existence with sheer hatred alone. But it was too late. Once the illusion shattered, everybody could finally see the machine underneath. And suddenly Pinewood Gardens was no longer afraid of Brenda Whitmore. They were furious with her. 3 weeks later, Pinewood Gardens looked quieter. Not peaceful exactly. More like the strange silence that settles over a house after somebody finally turns off an alarm that had been screaming for years. The morning air carried the smell of wet pavement and fresh coffee, while orange leaves drifted slowly across the curb outside my driveway. Winter was coming early that year. Brenda Whitmore's house sat dark most mornings now. No white Escalade parked outside. No clipboard petros. No violation notices taped to doors like passive-aggressive Christmas cards. Just silence. The HOA board held emergency elections the following Tuesday after the clubhouse disaster. Gerald Thornfield resigned before the vote even started. Apparently, public humiliation and possible financial investigations tend to shorten political careers pretty quickly. Brenda tried fighting everything at first. Denials, excuses, claims about misunderstanding reimbursement procedures. But spreadsheets do not care about excuses. Neither do audio recordings. By the end of the month, independent auditors were digging through 2 years of HOA finances while attorneys circled Pinewood Gardens like sharks smelling blood in the water. Funny how fast suburban royalty disappears once paperwork starts talking. The best part was watching the neighborhood slowly relearn how to act human again. Kids started leaving bicycles in driveways without parents panicking about fines. The elderly Vietnamese couple relit their garden lanterns. The single mother across the park let her children draw chalk dinosaurs across the sidewalk again. Small things. Normal things. Things people should never have been afraid of in the first place. One Saturday afternoon, Mrs. Olivia Bennett stopped by carrying a tin of homemade cinnamon cookies wrapped in a dish towel. The smell hit me before I even opened the front door. I thought victorious electricians deserved baked goods, she said with a tiny smile. Emma nearly stole the entire tin before I could thank her properly. Tyler followed me outside afterward while I rolled my trash, contoured the curb for collection day. The reinforced one, still standing perfectly straight. Rain stains on the side. A few scratches near the lid. Otherwise untouched. Dad, Tyler asked carefully, are you ever going to get rid of that thing? I looked at the trash sitting under the fading evening sunlight while cold wind rattled branches overhead. 600 pounds of concrete, steel rebar, and patience. Probably not. He grinned. It is kind of legendary now. Maybe it was. A few neighbors started calling it the monument after the HOA meeting fallout. Somebody even left a tiny toy traffic cone beside it one morning like a joke. Pinewood Gardens had finally learned how to laugh at itself again. Later that night, I sat alone in the garage with the door cracked open listening to soft rain tap against the driveway. The smell of sawdust, cold concrete, and black coffee filled the air while old classic rock hummed quietly from the shelf radio beside my toolbox. I thought about everything that happened over the past few months. All the stress, the threats, the endless paperwork. Brenda Whitmore thought power meant making people tired enough to surrender. But she misunderstood something fundamental about working people. We build things for a living. Patience, systems, foundations. Pressure does not always break us. Sometimes it just reveals what we are made of. Across the street, Brenda's house sat dark and empty again while water rolled softly down the curb beneath the streetlights. I took another sip of coffee and looked toward the reinforced trash, standing motionless near the sidewalk like a silent old soldier guarding the driveway. Brenda thought she was fighting over garbage. Turns out she crashed headfirst into evidence. And the beautiful thing about concrete is once it hardens, there is no reshaping it.